the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and great to have Joshua Alcock from Fortinet joining us today. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
it's good to be here.
Great to have you on the show. Real privilege. Maybe you can give folks an overview of where you fit into this big wide world of tech and cyber.
Yeah, so Fortinet is a cybersecurity vendor. Obviously, we've been around for quite a while, have quite a large footprint, specifically within the New Zealand market. But I fit into what we call operational technology cybersecurity, which is focused on protecting what are effectively critical assets for a wide range of industries, such as power generation, water treatment, manufacturing, and so forth.
Pretty critical infrastructure, isn't it? We kind of need that stuff going on an ongoing basis.
It keeps the world moving.
Yeah. Oh, well, great to have you here. Before we jump in, of course, a big thank you to our show partners, to AWS NZ, 2 Degrees Spark, HP Workday, and Gorilla Technology. Really appreciative of their support for the show, and of course their broader involvement in New Zealand's tech and innovation ecosystems. Now today we've got some big news. It's kept me pretty busy talking to different media today. Is AWS have however you want to put it, finally launched. Anyway, they've got their through availability zones here in New Zealand, so they're really turned on service for New Zealand locally. And I think I can't remember the exact discussion that we had, but when Rod Drury was in here a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking a little bit about the hyperscalers being in New Zealand, and possibly this was a chat we had off here, I can't recall, but anyway, we were sort of chatting around, some of the hyperscale data centers or projects had sort of been frozen in varying places. And I was kind of starting to wonder, is AWS actually going to be launching something here? So yeah, it's really encouraging to hear that that news today. There's probably a little bit of a mix up if you're looking around some of the news headlines in the media. I opened up stuff this morning whilst the story was under embargo, and there was a headline that really was just a reprint of the headline that we had 4 years ago in terms of AWS's original announcement of a $7.5 billion investment and so on. And that particular article didn't actually mention that they were opening today, but I think that the Prime Minister had mentioned something about it on a radio interview this morning. So it seemed to be a little bit of a mix up across some of the media trying to understand what had actually been announced and what was going on. But I think, really pleasing to see that, we've now got Microsoft and AWS with a pretty decent New Zealand capability. I think when you go into some of the details, it's probably a little bit harder to unpack. They talk about expecting to create 1,000 jobs, and look, I think there's definitely a positive flow on for job creation. They also talk about a $10.8 billion economic impact over a decade and a half. All of those things are positive, but pretty hard to measure. What's your take? Is this a good thing?
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
I think, and there's probably one or two others that we're still waiting on kind of standing up in New Zealand, but it definitely has. I mean, we use AWS quite heavily just within Fortinet. But yeah, from talking to a lot of customers, it is something that they've been waiting on having local presence for. Quite interestingly, within operational technology, actually, there's kind of been a cloud is not where we sit kind of thing, but that's kind of mindset has changed in the last couple of years, and we've done some work with AWS actually around specifically being able to design cloud first SCADA systems. So resilience is really important. So looking forward to maybe in some point in time, seeing some of that stuff put into practice here.
Yeah. One of the things that caught my attention is that they're waving a flag for using 100% renewable technology. And it's good for us to delve into that a little bit, because you do get these sort of bullet point, headlines around these sort of announcements, and you do need to recognize that, I guess, these companies are trying to tell a really good story. And I think there is a good story around them investing in renewables now through partnership with Mercury. They're saying that they've effectively, supporting more power generation than what they need through, wind farm investment. However, I think, just drilling in a little bit further, it's worth being aware they plug into the national grid. So, that the power from that wind farm doesn't just go straight to the AWS data center. That goes to, whoever else is plugged into the grid.
Yeah.
And so, there's a reality that if, coal's needing to be burnt at a particular time, or whatever it is, they're going to have to draw on that. And so I guess it's just I think a little bit of weariness sometimes for understanding that detail, but of course it's quite commonly. In fact, when I was speaking to one of the journos this morning, and I pointed that out, to them from one of the media outlets, they were like, "Oh, I've written a whole article all about that. Oh, thank you for telling me. Maybe I now need to write another article to straighten up the record, because they were so excited about it." So, the details do matter, I think.
Well, it's good that there is a push to using, renewable energy. We obviously do a lot with a lot of the power companies, both the from a generation perspective and a distribution perspective. But at the end of the day, they need to store that stuff somewhere, otherwise it goes to waste. And thankfully, it's something that we're starting to see get built up around New Zealand is the ability to store renewables. So
yeah, well, you'd be seeing that through some of the organisations you worked with before we came on air. You were chatting around some of what you'd seen in terms of the battery storage for power, and that seems to really be picking up at quite a pace in New Zealand now.
Yeah. No, it's good because otherwise it all just goes to waste, right? Which is kind of the last thing that we need, especially when we're trying to power these hyperscale data centers.
Yeah. Now, you live out sort of west direction, where a lot of these data centers have been visible. Now, there's one in particular that I think there's a fair bit of news about in the past, and it was saying, well, they haven't, there's been issues to do with, I think it was to do with water and resource consents and so on, and I think that was, the media reports were sort of saying, oh, well, AWS is stalled because this data center doesn't seem to be moving forward. But you've seen a fair bit of activity in some of those buildings, right?
Yeah, well, lack of building currently, but there is definitely activity on the site. So it's definitely something that's happening.
Yeah. So on that basis, part of the queries to AWS were in relation to who owns the infrastructure, where is it, and so on. And usually they don't tend to answer those sorts of things. They're like, oh, for protecting everybody's data, we would never tell you, and so on. But usually it's just a period of time, and most of that information does tend to
and they kind of
come in the public domain, right?
Yeah, and they stick out like a sore thumb as well.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to miss. It's not just like
it's trying really hard not to look like a data center. It's probably a data center.
Yeah. I was at Dawn Aerospace in Christchurch yesterday, and they're funny because there's no sign on the outside of the building to say that it's Dawn Aerospace, but it's pretty easy to find out where Dawn Aerospace are, and as soon as you come up close enough to sort of see through the windows, you can see big Dawn Aerospace logo on the reception desk. But very nice of them to have me, I think yeah, there are reasons why you keep some of this sort of stuff, not completely public, but usually you can't completely hide that information either. Right?
Yeah, there's a giveaway with all the generators and the air conditioning units that that you see on the side of it. But you're right, it is just ultimately to protect the data that's inside, right?
Mm. Now, part of that sort of curiosity around the data centers is who owns them. How much of this stuff is outsourced, has actually been built by by Amazon and fully owned by them, and we don't have that full clarity at the moment. But also the announcement that they had made going back 4 years was in relation to the $7.5 billion investment, the 1,000 jobs, the 10.8 billion in economic impact over 15 years. Interestingly, when the country manager was questioned around those things and how what period is that investment and so on, there was an unwillingness to answer that question. So I do wonder whether there have been some changes from what was initially announced, since they're no longer necessarily committing to those same things. It could just be that because the opening was delayed, that therefore some of the investment has been delayed and stretched over a slightly longer period. But it's probably one of those things that will remain something of a mystery.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you'll have 1,000 people working in the data center.
Not at all.
But I think regardless, it's good that we have it here finally.
Oh yeah. I mean, very pleasing. We haven't heard much from Google for a while, so they initially made an announcement 2022. So yeah, pretty quiet on their front, but looking at the economy and other factors, look, it's really pleasing that we now have AWS live here in New Zealand.
Yep.
So yeah,
and
each of those availability zones I think can be a minimum of one data center, but that is just where it's at right now. So we'll have to wait and see how that sort of evolves over time. But I would imagine that there will be ongoing and future investments in these areas. So,
would expect it. Yeah.
Now, also on a New Zealand front, interesting to hear about field days, which we're used to that happening around Hamilton each year. They're taking it, and it's the the largest agricultural event in the Southern Hemisphere. They're taking it to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, in 2027. So, yeah, that's got to be a good thing for our AgriTech sector to be, taking an event like that to Brazil, which is a pretty massive market. And I think the opportunity for New Zealand in terms of exporting more and more in the AgriTech sector is pleasing. So it'd be one to follow with interest, but I'm sure there'll be a bunch of companies in the agri-tech space that will be signing up to go and present what they've got to the Brazilian market.
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty good history in terms of innovating in the kind of agriculture tech side of things, or precision agriculture, especially around IoT. But nice segue there with the Amazon to Amazon.
Yeah. Funny. And so on a global basis, interesting that Microsoft now have their own in-house models. So they're not, they haven't been fully reliant on OpenAI, because they've become, something of a go-to with Azure, where you could tap in and use whichever, models that you want. And of course, they were actually very quick with GPT-5 and making that available through Copilot. But the fact that they now have their own kind of homegrown in-house AI models, MAI voice one, MAI one preview, and yeah, I guess this is natural for Microsoft. Yeah, they've got the scale, they've got the capability to do this stuff. I think they've done very well through their partnership with OpenAI and their ownership there, but it's hard to know how all that stuff plays out. These things can be somewhat volatile. You never know what the next day may bring.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this continues to evolve.
Yeah. Yep. So some of that stuff is available online now for those who want to jump in and try it out. So they've got you can go in and actually try out the voice model, I believe, but I haven't had any success with that yet. So I'll come back and let's see how that actually plays out. But they're saying they've trained it on 15,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs. So that's a reasonable investment right there.
It is. It'll be interesting to see how the kind of the threat actor side of things adopts this as well, because it's always something that is, we use things for the good side and the bad guys use this technology for the bad as well. So
always, yeah. And what are you noticing on that front? How much AI leverage are you seeing in the cybersecurity world from bad actors?
It's definitely lowered the barrier for entry, right? Like I think there was an article the other day around sort of guardrails being bypassed in order to elicit kind of some kind of attacks. But like anything, if it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. Synthetic voice obviously is something that can then be used for for phishing and things like that. So yeah, but it has been it's just made everything easier for both the bad guys and the good guys to stop them. So.
Yeah. Workday have put out a new report, research in relation to AI agents, and there's a whole lot in there, and we'll link to that report from nztechpodcast.com site and the supporting post for the episode. But there are a couple of kind of headline numbers that jumped out at me. One, the majority, 75% of workers are comfortable teaming up with AI agents. But it was the next one that really caught me. But only 30% say they're comfortable being managed by one. I'm surprised anybody wants to be managed by an
zero,
AI agent, right? That was like, what?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question actually to be surveying people on, and an interesting reflection on where AI is actually able to operate. And look, the reality is that for some types of roles and some work and things that you need to deliver across a whole wide range of roles, you could break elements of management down to a process and hand them over to an AI. But boy, I can't imagine that goes down very well unless you can fit that in as supporting real people and real managers, not an actual complete replacement for for key management within a business.
It's quite dystopian, isn't it? It's
But is this an inevitability from your perspective?
Like anything, I'm assuming that we're kind of seeing the peak hype for a lot of these things, and then it'll eventually kind of plateau once we've figured out what the actual, real use cases are in real life. I think we saw that with generative AI in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
It kind of peaked and then fell into the trough of despair, and then kind
Yes.
of normalized, and people have kind of figured out what it's good for and what it's not. So I'm assuming we'll see something similar too.
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty interesting road ahead, and I think there's certainly a lot that hasn't been fully figured out, and a lot that probably doesn't make sense to most people at the moment. But we will keep progressing through those. I think some of the predictions around AI probably well overhyped, and we're now kind of seeing that multiple years in, as we are, there's a range of issues that are yet to be resolved, but there are areas where AI, whether it's Gen AI or other sort of machine learning type uses are there's good places where they work well and places where they don't.
Yeah,
right?
like any technology, right? And I mean, from a threat detection perspective, it's something that's not new. Using machine learning for looking for anomalies and kind of suspicious activities, and then also from a detection, from a reactive perspective as well, making people's jobs easier when it comes to security operations. But like anything, we'll see when it kind of normalizes, and
before we sort of delve in a bit more into what's happening in the Fortinet world and your recent report, other thing I wanted to tap in was there's been coverage on Masterdon, who of course got their Twitter competing platform, which is decentralized, and I see that they've been pushing back and saying, look, they can't comply with new age verification laws. Specifically, they're referencing Mississippi's age verification law. And that also saw Blue Sky pull out of Mississippi as well. It's kind of interesting to me that we're seeing these new approaches all over the world in terms of how to try and put some sort of control around social media. It's been suggested for New Zealand that anyone under 16, should be blocked from access to social media, which of course potentially can include the likes of YouTube. I'm yet to be convinced that that's the right answer, although I understand the perspective of we want to protect our children. I'm just not necessarily sure what the best way is to do it. And in some ways, hey, you have to try something, but it's how do you help families? How do you help parents in good ways? But this type of, I don't know, it feels like quite a sledgehammer approach is an interesting one, and then it triggers potentially a whole bunch of differing approaches that then have to be followed.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a bit of a throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But
yeah, which is it's kind of sometimes the way the world works.
It is, yeah.
So it'll be an interesting one to follow, of course. Because we've got Australia, so close to home with similar type of legislation. I think what we will see is lots of just reality checks of what does and doesn't work. What are the side effects that maybe haven't necessarily been fully resolved. So we'll get some interesting examples, I'm sure, over the next little while.
Yeah, I think sometimes lagging behind the rest of the world a little bit can be a bit of a benefit for us, in terms of finding out what works and letting them kind of go through the hard yards.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, ultimately, someone, a region, country, whatever, does have to take some leadership in some of these areas because, as you're talking about before, there's the good sides and the bad sides of how technology gets utilized. And when we do get our heads around, at least to some degree, some of the bad sides, then, we have to work on minimizing those. All right. So I'm keen to hear a little bit about this new report. What can you tell us about the Fortinet 2025 industrial cybersecurity industry analysis? Who will this be of interest to?
I guess this will be of interest to anyone who operates anything that falls under that operational technology banner, and that's kind of something that's grown, I think, considerably in the past.
Because we're all impacted by it, right?
We are,
even if you don't operate that type of operational technology. If it goes down, if the power grid goes down, or we stop getting
cameras, traffic lights stop working, if we can't get clean drinking water, if we can't get rid of waste, it is. I think a good example is what happened in Spain and Portugal earlier this year. Right, we saw quite quickly how society had a little bit of a collapse, and given how everything's connected now, that wasn't a cyber-related incident, but we've seen in other parts of the world what can be done.
We have done, yes. Yeah.
So we have to kind of anticipate that. Yeah.
That's right. And sometimes it's other things that impact. I mean, even here in New Zealand, there were issues with, I think it was the pipeline from Northland through to Auckland, a few years ago, and it wasn't a cyber attack, but it impacted the availability of or that capability for transporting fuel, between, was it Northport and Auckland, and when those things stop, that has sometimes a reasonably wide impact. So I think it's important for all of us that these things are looked after, right? How would you say that our state is from a cyber perspective when we look at this type of infrastructure and how it's being protected from a cybersecurity perspective? I think a lot of people would maybe hope for the best in terms of how things are looked after, but it's probably pretty variable out there, isn't it?
It is, and I think because we're looking at environments that traditionally haven't been connected to the internet in the past, things that have been running for sometimes 20 to 30 years, right? They don't understand what kind of traditional or what we're used to from a networking perspective. I think initially with a lot of, and we learn a lot when it comes to sort of attacks on critical infrastructure from what's happening in conflicts, right? And initially, a lot of the stuff was, what happens when someone gets it and they don't know what they're doing, because a lot of the stuff may be exposed to the internet, and disruptions are caused there. If you, are familiar with Shodan and you search on Shodan for internet exposed industrial control systems, there is a lot of stuff out there, unfortunately. And then we have obviously the kind of the nation state type targeting towards critical infrastructure, but it is definitely something that is nowhere near as mature as the IT side of businesses, but fortunately, in my experience, the people that I deal with here in the industry all have kind of the right idea. They are all trying to do the best they can with what they've got. We unfortunately don't have any kind of compelling event to mandate, cybersecurity for critical infrastructure or operational technology like we do in other parts of the world. Australia is a really good example with the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. But within industry, everyone is doing their best, which is good.
Well, it's one of the issues that because a lot of these environments were not connected to the internet in the past, that there just wasn't the attention sort of paid to typical, cybersecurity things. And then for varying reasons, we end up connecting what is sometimes, archaic infrastructure, and it gets connected up. And actually, in many ways, it shouldn't be, because it's not, maybe not fit for purpose from a security perspective.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, there's this kind of maybe idea that everything is still air gapped like stuff used to be. I think kind of, if we go back to 2010 with Stuxnet, there was kind of the first kind of exposure that the world had to kind of cyber attacks on sort of operational technology.
Mm-hmm.
But there's business drivers to connect a lot of these things. I think we're all sick to death of the term digital transformation now, but it is. But yeah, we're kind of lagging behind. But that is often because these environments weren't built to be connected, and we're trying to connect them. We see newer environments that are being built in energy, specifically around green energy, things being built securely, built with intent to be connected, and we're looking a lot better in that aspect. But unfortunately, a lot of the operational technology or critical infrastructure side of things is still quite legacy.
So what are the things from, or maybe tell us a little bit about the report, in terms of who was involved in that, and is this an annual report that Fortinet are putting out?
It's an annual one that we put out. We've done it for the last few years, and it's kind of targeting a range of people across a range of organizations across the world, to get a good picture of that. One thing, though, I guess that kind of comes out at the end of it is cybersecurity for operational technology is becoming more visible to the business. We take a very different approach than we do for traditional IT cybersecurity. It's a safety and availability first approach, as opposed to a lock everything down and segment it and isolate it. Because what we're used to doing for IT is supporting the business, but what we're doing with OT is the business. If a power company can't generate and distribute power, or a manufacturing plant can't make what they're supposed to be making, the business suffers very quickly. Or if they can't keep people safe, it's a lot more than just kind of my emails or something like that. Yeah.
And how significant do you think the issues are at the moment? Because we're not often hearing around cyber related issues for operational technology. It's not often that we hear that there's been a major infrastructure issue that comes that's tied back to cyber at this point. But of course, things can flip and change really quickly, which is probably not a world that we want to imagine too much, unless we're reading a science fiction novel or something. I think outside of kind of regions of conflict, a lot of it is maybe attacks on IT infrastructure that then affects the OT side of the business. Colonial Pipeline was a really good example. Yeah, that's right.
Right, it was an attack on the IT side of the business, but just to be safe, they shut down the distribution side. So, whereas and then there's kind of attacks on critical infrastructure from a nation state perspective, where depending on who's doing it and who the target is, it may not necessarily. They might not want to be seen. They might be doing it for espionage purposes or for pre-positioning purposes or something like that, whereas other countries may want to have a destructive impact. But yeah, it's a big, it's like anything in cybersecurity, right? We're kind of dealing with people, process, and technology. We're trying to change mindsets. Unfortunately, a lot of these mindsets that we're kind of trying to change have been doing things a particular way for 20 plus years, and it's people are difficult to to sway sometimes.
Yes, we all like to not have to change. How are attackers, targeting OT that would be, different from how, IT environments get targeted?
I mean, I don't think, up until recently, it hasn't really been anything different than how they've been targeting IT infrastructure. There's a lot of commonality. There's obviously a lot of differences between these sorts of environments. A lot of what's used in OT environments is PLCs, SCADA systems, that sort of thing, which are unique to that. But then they also rely a lot on Windows systems. There's your standard kind of switching and things like that in these environments. So vulnerabilities in those are targeted. Often a lot of the time it is just things are connected in ways they shouldn't be and accidentally exposed. But yeah, there's definitely I think it was in the last kind of couple of years, there's been more specific attacks targeted towards these sorts of environments, but they have a lot of backing behind them. They are generally nation state kind of backed or state adjacent or aligned.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas your kind of traditional script kiddie is not going to, necessarily have access to that tooling. But there is also a big crossover now between kind of cybercrime groups and that kind of state aligned side of things. So leveraging shared infrastructure and shared tactics and techniques.
Yeah. So are you seeing a lot of these sort of entities with, that are responsible for our infrastructure or, have operational technology, getting those environments audited? Is that becoming more and more common that they're getting somebody to come in and sort of sense check where they're at and reveal for them, where they need to be investing and paying extra attention?
Yeah, definitely. It is something in the last couple of years that has become a lot more prevalent, thankfully. A lot of it, I think, is looking at what's happening in the rest of the world. We've got, what's happening in Australia with the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, which has been in place for a number of years now, through a number of iterations, which means they've kind of learned a lot of the hard lessons. A lot of what's coming out of Singapore and other countries and the APAC region as well is giving us a good idea of what we should be doing. There's still no mandate or anything here, and hopefully there will be soon, because it would be nice to have kind of you must be this tool to ride type thing, right? A kind of a base level of security, because at the end of the day, this stuff affects everyone. But yeah, there is definitely a focus, and thankfully, a lot of the organizations are taking notice of what should be or could possibly be coming their way and doing what should be done. None of it is really anything outside of what you should be doing from a good cybersecurity hygiene perspective anyway. So.
But there are some extras, I guess. I think about this. Our team at Gorilla Technology, are often involved in going in and doing these sort of cybersecurity audits, and I have wondered, and this obviously varies from organisation to organisation, but how far should you go, and access control systems, I guess, sort of fit into this sort of world, and I've seen some interesting bits and pieces to do with the way some of these things are run, and I may have mentioned this previously, but I remember going into during the COVID window into one of New Zealand's largest, tallest office blocks. And for some reason, the lifts weren't able to take you up to, the floors. So they just handed you a swipe card. And the swipe card that we were handed, I decided just to just to test it out on some other tenancies, and on the tenancy we were visiting, because it was really just supposed to get us access to that particular floor. It turned out that was kind of a master key, fully enabled to access, any entity within the building from what we could see, whether that was a big multinational firm, a government agency, or what have you. And it seems to be that's an area that often misses out on attention. That's sort of more on the physical kind of security side, but all of these things are part of the picture that probably don't generally get a look in with a traditional cybersecurity audit, certainly not for sort of smaller firms anyway.
Yeah, and kind of going back to what you're saying about data centers, right? You've got all the access control, you've got all the power side of things, the cooling. You have, CCTV cameras, and which are no longer really closed circuit anymore. They're, everything's connected. The kind of the scope of OT is kind of expanded to include a lot of the IoT stuff, the medical IoT devices. And it's kind of funny you mentioning that story, because a lot of these environments that you go into, they are effectively built on trust, and they are flat networks. They have no access control between parts of the environment. So if you kind of get in, you kind of have the keys to the kingdom. And that's something that has been kind of pushed, I think, as an approach. As SANS Institute have a really good list of 5 controls that they talk about for securing OT. The first one is, it's around figuring out what you've got, in your environment, because obviously you need to know what you're protecting. But then you have things around, what are your crown jewels? What actually do you need to protect, and how can you protect it? And obviously, in a lot of these environments, you have legacy things that can't be patched. You will see Windows XP systems. You'll see things older than that the vendor might not support if they are patched. So how do you secure those while still allowing a plant to function? It's an interesting side of the business. It's like what we were doing in IT 15 years ago, right?
I was in a factory, yesterday, and the equipment that they happened to be running on the floor in that case was at the more modern end of things. But anyone that has walked the floor and some of these factories, some of that tech it's
not bleeding edge.
Is really old. And if those things get connected to the internet, which they can do for varying reasons, then probably opening up some pretty scary level of threats.
And I think it's taking a risk-based approach to this stuff. Kind of, do you need to do certain things? If you do, then are you aware of all the risks associated with it? And then it's also the same thing around protecting them as well. There's a lot of vulnerabilities out there in software, and a lot that are kind of being published around kind of industrial control systems as well, but they don't necessarily exist in a position where they can be exploited. So, they might kind of fall kind of further down on your list of priorities for patching if they ever get patched. So it's taking some of that mindset that we've had in IT cybersecurity and applying it to kind of that safety and availability mindset as well, but in small pieces, because it is something that this stuff that we're talking about is very simple stuff. It's just not easy to execute at all in these environments.
That's great. So if folks are interested in having a look at the report, we will link that from NZ Tech Podcast website, and I think from the show notes, I believe. So anything else that you'd like to add there, Joshua?
No, I just think it's really good that this is becoming a topic of interest for people, because it is something that is kind of has a big impact on society in general, right? And operational technology and critical infrastructure is becoming more and more of a target. We can't really rely on being down the far end of the world when you're connected over the internet. And New Zealand in general, I think, is a bit of a soft target. So
which is sad, isn't it? And some of this is our sort of size and scale, economic capability. We see the Australian government have really lent in a lot more in terms of multiple perspectives, but how much money that they put in these areas. And New Zealand, for varying reasons, we end up in a somewhat different world, and I hope that we get on okay, but hope isn't a strategy.
It's not all. I mean, there is, we are seeing, a lot of these organizations take it upon themselves though to do a lot of stuff around strengthening their resilience, even though they aren't mandated to. So, it's good to see that, and hopefully we end up, continue on that track where we end up in a position where we are, more cyber resilient for our critical infrastructure systems.
Yep. Good. And for folks that are listening in and they may be keen to learn a little bit more, what is it that Fortinet can do in terms of in this space?
There's kind of three key things that we sort of focus on for operational technology from a cybersecurity perspective. The first one's around helping people get better visibility into their environment. You've got to protect, stuff that exists. The second thing is kind of then, exactly like you said, with being able to walk throughout the building, how do you kind of restrict access within the environment? It's kind of one of those things where it's we're not talking about an if it'll happen to you. We're not even really talking about a when. It's now often a when you discover that it's actually been happening to you for quite a while type thing. But and then the other thing is that we're focusing on quite a lot is around secure remote access into these environments, because a lot of these environments are extremely complex. The skill set to manage them doesn't often exist within the organization. So third parties are going to be coming in and managing a lot of the stuff, and there's some cowboy stuff that goes on out there. So,
unfortunately true.
And we're all part of a big supply chain, so we've got to kind of do our part.
Oh, good stuff. Well, thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Really good to have you. And of course, big thank you to our show partners, to Workday, 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Thanks everyone for joining us. Now, if you've been listening to the audio, then encourage you to follow us across on the likes of YouTube. You can follow myself on LinkedIn. We often live stream there on a Tuesday afternoon as well. And we're on X and Facebook as well from a video perspective. And of course, if you've been watching the video, then make sure you're following us on those audio podcast platforms, the likes of Spotify, Apple Podcasts, your favorite podcast app. And these days, I guess YouTube Music as well is becoming an increasingly common platform for podcasts. So thanks everyone. We'll catch you again on the next episode next week. And if you've got any comments, feel free to get in touch via the website. All right. Haere.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.